That is new music from the 16th. That's the musical outlet for Wellington-based composer and producer Richard Walley. The album is titled Winters in the World, and it traces the Anglo-Saxon year across 12 tracks, 7 atmospheric orchestral pieces, and 5 progressive house tracks. It's structured around the pre-Christian and Christian seasonal calendars that coexisted in early medieval England. Here is Richard to tell us what inspired him to put together this unique collection of ambient and progressive house music. It's music you can learn from and dance to. But first, why the 16th?
I was casting around for an abstract name for a band, and I was lucky enough to find myself in Paris a few years ago, and was wondering, you know how all the districts in Paris are called the 10th,
I do
12th,
not know that. I've never been
there. Fair enough. So that was all it was, and I was just sort of there was a particular district, the 16th, that I really liked, and I was like,
oh, nice.
Hang on, okay, that's not a band name that anybody's used so far. So
that's true. Very cool. All right, I was just curious about that. And so you've got this third album coming out, and let's see, the title I have it written down here, and I of course can't read my own writing. Oh, Winters in the World. So yeah, Winters in the World. So it's your third album, and it's kind of a concept piece. So maybe for folks who haven't heard the previous 2 records, give a little background as to what you've been doing and how it got to the point where you are now.
Yeah. So, so I've been writing music for years and years and years, and writing all sorts of different kinds of music and trying various different things. I was in and out of various different bands for years and making demos, and sort of earlier in my life was very, very into abstract ambient things. I was doing sort of laptop gigs and stuff like that, and then got more into DJing, and then kind of went back to thinking about orchestral music. I don't know, I bipped around all over the place. This particular project was when I sort of decided that I needed to actually kind of get serious about putting some music out in the world that I could stand behind, rather than maybe doing some of the more experimental things I'd done before. And so I started with an EP, where I was working mostly with a band, with a group of actually fantastic musicians who I was really lucky to be working with, and that was kind of really good fun. But I sort of found myself a little frustrated, is the wrong word, but I wanted to be able to work with a broader palette of sounds than I had available, even with the 8 musicians I was squeezing onto the stage, which was quite a lot.
Right.
So at that point, I sort of, the whole thing became more of a recording rather than live led project. And the first 2 albums, the first one, as you'd sort of expect, was kind of a bit of an explosion of every single idea I've had in my life.
Got up till then.
Was sort of that got me up until then. The second one was an attempt to be a bit more refined and a little more conceptual. So that was very much kind of rooted in the geography of New Zealand, in some of the mountains of the South Island. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
I'm most comfortable when my music is about something, when I've got a set of images or a story or something that I'm trying to tell, as you said, almost a concept piece.
Yeah. All right. So what is this one about? The Winters in the World.
So this is it's inspired by a book I read by Eleanor Parker called Winters in the World, which describes the Anglo-Saxon year. So it's a series of festivals and seasons, and the ways in which people in Northern Europe in the sort of 10th, 11th, 12th century experienced the year.
Right.
And I really liked it because it was real. It's a real mixture of the familiar and the alien. It's on the one hand, they still sort of had Christmas and they still had Easter, and they have things that we have now.
Yep.
But they also lived in a world in which there were only 2 seasons. There
Right.
was winter and and there was summer, and there
Yep.
wasn't anything else in between. And an awful lot of other kind of festivals, both religious and pagan, and some of them a bit of both, that celebrated equinoxes, harvests, solstices. And I, for some reason, I just found myself really intrigued by this idea of the world turning for these people in that way, as I said, that's simultaneously sort of familiar and alien. And it gave me a lot of musical ideas that I was really interested in following up.
Uh-huh. So when you say it gave you musical ideas, can you be more specific?
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely a how long have you got question.
All right,
But
let it rip.
um, so um, so
Maybe use one of
medieval.
the tracks as an example, and we'll play a little bit for folks that they want to hear.
Ah, yeah, okay. So music in medieval times had a whole range of techniques and ways of doing music, that are very, very characteristic of that particular age. So we think things like, sort of organum and hockets, and sort of plain chant people will be sort of fairly familiar with. Various different kind of like canons and things, just ways, technical ways of organizing notes that are, almost similar to the way these days we think about like verse, chorus, middle, eight.
Right.
It's a
Mhm.
similar set of things. So one of these techniques, hocket, is a really, really fun one. It's a technique where you have different instruments that are taking it in turns to play different notes in a melody. So and often, you would have spatial effects, so you have different singers kind of going doop, bap, bap, doop, doop, tap, doop, and passing a melody between them.
Right.
So the 10th track from the album, the now you'll have to excuse my Anglo-Saxon because it's not fantastic, but I think
It's
it's
probably
pronounced
better than mine,
Nihilmod.
so we'll let you do it.
But yeah, but that's a track where you can hear that hocketing effect, that
Ah,
that
yeah.
kind of passing of the melody between different instruments. So yeah, and you'll hear the second track, the Tokheim, the another winter track, has the melody is a it's an organum melody, which is a particular form of plain chant. I should say, for people who haven't listened to the album, this album doesn't sound medieval. It doesn't
No,
sound like monks and things.
no
Um,
Gregorian chants or anything like that.
no, no, exactly. But what it does do is the techniques of the age are sort of in the DNA of the music that I've put together and built on for it.
All right. So, and you use electronic beats and modern instrumentation and technology and all that. Is that unusual for folks making, that are kind of drawn to this kind of music and inspired by it?
Um, Probably. I don't. I mean, sort of. The world is full of all sorts of people, and I mean, so somebody who I've almost always admired, that you might kind of consider a touchstone for this sort of thing, is Murkoff, sort of Mexican writer and
Okay.
electronic music, and his first album, Martez, was really, I think it was 2001. I think was an album that, although it sounded incredibly modern, used a lot of kind of quite fragmented samples of classical, medieval, and sort of neo-medieval music. He sampled a lot of Arvo Pärt and some Steve Reich
Uh-huh.
and Goretzky and various other sort of I don't know, yeah, neo-medieval composers, and he's sort of carried on doing that throughout his career. So the Versailles Sessions, which is really kind of fascinating, if sort of abstract album. It's one of the, it's one of those albums you sort of admire rather than enjoy.
Okay.
Is sort of, that is kind of cut up and processed and repurposed fragments of Baroque music, of sort of the court music of France from the 18th century. So it's not unknown that electronic composers will reach into the past for inspiration, and I think, and that's what I've done here, and I like that. I find it's a very creative place when you're sort of bringing two worlds or two of those ideas together.
Right.
You end up with something quite novel, I hope.
Yeah. All right. And there's a track, let's see, track 8, Midsummer. Are there vocals in that? Because that sounds like there were. And
Yeah, absolutely. So that's that was a track. It does have vocals, and there you meet all sorts of fascinating people on the internet. I thought this was something where I wanted some sort of vocal thing happening, and there's a fantastic singer from Kenya called Wagatoni, who sings in the Kikuyu language.
okay.
And those are the vocals that you hear on Midsummer. And if you're wondering what the Kikuyu language has got to do with Anglo-Saxon, which you probably are,
I certainly am now.
um, uh, what it is that the the music of the 10th and 11th centuries probably would sound quite alien to us now. It wouldn't sound recognizably Western or recognizably English. Most of the way that we sing or hear plain chant is not actually the way it would have been done
Uh-huh.
in those years. What it would have been far more similar to, I think, or at least I like to think, and there are different opinions on this, is the kind of heavily ornamented monody that is more characteristic of music that we now think of as being sort of Byzantine or North African, or from Central Asia, and sort of these. I wanted some aspect of that on the album. I wanted something that was sort of trying to represent a sound world that gives in some way a message that actually Northern Europe was not the place that you think it is from the
Gotcha. Yeah.
history
Yeah.
books.
Yeah.
And so this, these particular vocals, I don't, this sort of really spoke to me and really kind of seemed to make a really strong addition to the track in that way. So
Okay.
that's how they ended up there.
All right. And you mentioned that at the calendar back then, a lot of the Anglo-Saxon was only 2 seasons, winter and summer. There were 4 on some concurrent calendars happening at the same time, I understand, because I did a little research for myself. But so I'm curious as to why you chose winter as the one that you kind of titled the album after.
Oh, it was very just a simple thing from the book, was that how the way that you would measure somebody's age would be the number of winters that they'd lived through.
I gotcha.
So you would talk about somebody as having 40 winters in the world,
Gotcha.
and so because the album is about this structure of age and time passing and different seasons and the sort of constant progression of time, it seemed like a it just seemed like a nice title. I liked it. I liked
Okay.
the idea.
So, other than the book that you read, did you do a lot of other research in order to kind of be in the right frame of mind for all this stuff? I don't know what's involved in writing a song about, stuff that happened 1,000 years ago, but there you go.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I'm kind of I'm kind of a bit of a medieval history nerd
Oh,
anyway.
good. Well, that's what I want to
So
hear.
so that was when I kind of came up with when I sort of thought, well, what am I what am I going to do for the next album? And I thought, oh, hang on a minute, there was that thing about the Anglo-Saxon calendar that immediately pinged for me. Um, I did have to kind of dredge up quite a lot of reading about the various different compositional techniques that I've been talking about. Some of them I
Right.
knew about already. Some of them I didn't. I didn't really understand, and so there was quite a lot of reading there, but actually, uh, sort of also understanding in equal measure. This is the first. It's kind of it's the album is 50% ambient and 50% progressive house,
Okay.
and this is the first time I've actually done anything in the progressive house genre,
Right.
and it was a thing that really appealed to me. And then I knew that I liked it, but I didn't really understand sort of deeply before I started writing how the genre worked. So there was an awful lot of it kind of started with leftism and albums like that, which I'd always loved leftism, but then moved out into sort of John Hopkins and kind of wider reaches of Future Sound of London, all of that sort of stuff. So there was a lot of listening in that space as well to bring the two sound worlds together.
Uh-huh. Okay. And is this the kind of thing? How do you take it out on the road? Do you do gigs? How,
There's well,
or is it? Do you advise people to sit there with their headphones on and listen to it and kind of turn the lights off? How should people best enjoy this music?
um, I uh, I would say uh, sort of probably put your headphones on and go for a walk.
Right?
I think that'll do
There's
you
a lot
some
of that
good.
going on these days, so that's good.
Yeah, if we can ever kind of get rid of the rain in central Wellington,
Yeah.
I would
Well, it
go
is
out
winter,
on.
so that's appropriate.
Yeah, absolutely. I would go out on a cold evening, have a look at the stars. Maybe Matariki's coming up, obviously. So see if
Yeah.
you can sort of go outside and see Matariki rising and sort of contemplate the vastness of the universe, I suppose.
And it is kind of a dance record, isn't it?
Um, yeah, I think it is. I think it is. I'm a little bit surprised myself about that because I wasn't I'm not much of a dancer, but I the more of it that I made and the more of it that I tinkered with, the more I felt like this just felt right for this record.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, interesting, interesting. All right. So, have you been thinking about what you're going to do next, or you, or what do you, when the album is out, just out now? So, what other than just having it out there, is there more of a process of releasing to you, or are you just moving on to the next thing?
Um, oh yeah, well there's a bit of a follow up that I do. I've got there's a little community on Substack that sort of that I write for that
Oh,
where I talk a little bit more in depth about how I've written the music
oh, cool.
and what it means and so forth. So
And is that under
um
your name on Substack, or how can people find it?
oh under the 16th
The 16th.
on yeah on Substack. So if people are interested in finding out more about how I wrote this and what I was thinking about it and all of the various references and stuff, then I'll be writing some articles over the next kind of couple of months, I think, that'll set that out a little bit more. So
Right.
that's quite satisfying. And then and then apart from that, I'll be quietly slipping some of these tracks into some of my DJ sets. So
Sure. I can see how that would work, actually. It'd be cool.
Yeah, so I've got I play sort of semi regularly at the Rogue and Vagabond and in town, and I don't sort of I don't tend to make a big thing about dropping these tunes, but I do, they will be coming up in some of those sets over the next couple of months, and it'll be interesting to see how the crowd reacts for them. Yeah.
Right. And overall in Wellington or the surrounding area, is there a scene that you're a part of that makes the kind of music that you make, or are you kind of a loner?
I'm yeah, I suppose I'm more of a loner. I suppose that's a fair thing to say.
No, not necessarily. Work for Neil Young.
Yeah. I mean, there's sort of there's a number of people that I'm in touch with overseas and in different countries, and a number of musicians I correspond with. So there's a little bit of a sort of this kind of thing that people do that is more of a global thing than a local thing.
Right.
I would love to be doing sort of more local stuff and potentially more live stuff, but a few of these tracks require a very big orchestra, and so I need to be someone would need to stump up a lot of money.
Yes.
Or this album would need to be extremely successful before we get to see it live.
All right. And did you use in the making of the record, is it mostly orchestral and electronic sounds you made yourself, or did you work with a lot of other people?
Bit of a mixture, really. There's a lot of so I mean, I said there's a few musicians who who recorded a number of the parts on the album, who did a really excellent job. Again, mostly people based overseas, so work with some really good string players who are based in Argentina, actually, who
really
do some fantastic recording work. Yeah. But also there's an awful lot of there's probably more processing on the album than it sounds like.
Mm-hmm.
There's an awful lot of I mean, I said I was a bit of a medieval history nerd. I'm a bit of a nerd about an awful lot of things, and the other one of the other things I'm a big nerd about is tinkering with sounds and re-recording them and putting them out through various speakers and processing them. So it's I've tried as far as possible to keep it sounding organic and natural, and I hope that that's come across.
Yeah.
Even though that there are some obvious sort of electronic elements going through it.
Yeah. So it must be very satisfying having it out if you're kind of a nerdy, tinkering kind of guy that's been spending a lot of time on everything, every little bit of it, right?
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's nice. It's always nice to have done something. It's always nice to get to the point where you kind of go, oh, that's great, that's out, that's a thing that I've done. I have to say my favorite part is still the writing and the recording.
Right.
It's this bit now is nice in a sort of completeness sense, but I feel as though if all I ever had to do was write and record and didn't ever have to think about releasing things, then I writing and recording would be just what I would spend my time doing. That's really where I'm happiest.
If you enjoyed this episode of the 13th Floor's Music Talk series, please be sure to subscribe to the website or to the YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook or Instagram and wherever you find your podcasts. There's a whole lot more to discover.